Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in beautiful downtown Wayne. And we like to showcase people who are doing interesting, amazing things in the community that makes our lives more interesting, more bearable, and doing really important things. And today we have an outstanding artiste and artist named Jonathan Mandell. You probably saw his picture all over the news because he was one of the artists selected to paint the donkey forms for the Democratic National Convention. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Bonnie. How you doing?
Okay. How did you get selected to paint the donkeys for Connecticut and Delaware?
So it was a competition that I applied for, and I was one of 30 artists that was selected, and then they just assigned us our states. But I was thrilled to get Connecticut and Delaware, particularly Delaware because it's part of our tri-state area.
The Delaware donkey features the Nemours Gardens on the front view, as well as a Delaware Democratic Committee logo of the blue hen. The state flower, the peach blossom, is shown as well. And the rear of the donkey features a Bethany Beach scene with a tribute to Beau Biden, the late Delaware Attorney General and son of Vice President Joe Biden. Did you pick all the elements yourself?
So the way the process worked was each state selected 6 icons that they wanted us to pick from. So we had to pick 3 out of the 6 and incorporate them into our drawings. So we created drawings which were then submitted and approved.
You got more than 3 here.
Well, there are things that weren't part of their list that I included, but I had to include at least 3 from their punch list.
And the Connecticut donkey tells the story of Mark Twain having lived in Connecticut for 20 years. During that time, he wrote A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. The image of Twain is based on period book jacket art. I inserted Twain's head over the original artwork. The old State House building is depicted on the face of the donkey, as well as the charter oak tree. Can we put some of those up on? There we go.
Oh, there are the donkeys.
Oh, now which one is that one?
That's Connecticut.
That's Connecticut.
So the iconography on that, that's the old State House building on the front. And just behind that, along the ears and along the side, is the charter oak tree. You see the big green tree?
Yes.
So that's a big part of Connecticut's history. If you go look at the Connecticut States Quarter, the charter oak is what they chose. So that was one of the images they wanted me to include. I came up with Mark.
And that's Mark Twain.
That is. So I came up with Mark Twain because I thought that was an interesting Connecticut story that many people might not know about. They associate him more with the riverboats in Missouri and whatnot, but he lived there for 20 years and wrote a novel with Connecticut in the title. So I thought it was a story to be told.
And there's a Mark Twain house there.
There is.
That's a wonderful place to visit when you're up there in that neighborhood. It's terrific.
So my take on it was I did a sort of Monty Python-esque scene where I pasted Twain's head, like you were saying, on this period book jacket art where it had a knight, and I put Twain on there. And Twain is holding a submarine because they wanted me to reference Groton, Connecticut with the submarine base. So the Monty Python thing is he's holding the submarine, getting ready to hurl it at a lighthouse.
You usually work with ceramic tiles. That's been your forever. That's been the medium that you work with. Was it difficult to switch and paint instead of?
So it was interesting for me because
you've also done years ago when on the main line, I forget who sponsored it, but
the Mainline Center for the Arts.
Mainline Center for the Art. They had those. They're not styrofoam. What are they made out?
They were fiberglass dogs, really large fiberglass dogs.
And your dog was far and away the most magnificent.
Well, thank you.
But you also, it was mosaic tiles, the whole dog.
Yeah, I jacketed the dog form in mosaic. It was an art awareness theme, so I did Gustav Klimt's The Kiss in mosaic wrapped around a dog form. And that was really challenging because the sculpture is 3-dimensional and the original artwork is 2, so I had to invent all the rear views that don't exist and distort it all, like I say, onto a dog form and try to capture some of the elegance of Gustav Klimt.
So how difficult was it to switch to just painting? What medium did you use to paint the donkeys with?
So they suggested we work with acrylic paint, The donkey forms are life-size, and they're very mottled surface, like a mule's hair kind of thing, very textured.
Oh.
And if you're not familiar, acrylic paint is very thick. So you're pushing this paint into all these crevices. It's very resistant, the surface of these donkeys, to high detail. You really have to spend some time building it up and working the detail into it.
Did you get paid to do this project?
They gave us a stipend up front, and then September 9th, they're going to have an auction for all these donkeys, and then the artists get a percentage from that auction. It's a cumulative pot that we get a percentage from.
Okay. When the Mainline Art Center auctioned off all the dogs, yours was way up here, the price, way above everybody else in the sky, right?
Yeah, I was thrilled. It sold highest at auction. It was like $23,000 back in '02. So
it was a huge amount of money, but it was the most gorgeous dog.
Thank you.
So somebody who's like George Strimmel from Radnor Studio 21, who's an English lit lover, maybe he's going to bid on the Mark Twain donkey.
I know the states get first dibs.
Oh, I'm sure. Anyway, where did you go to school, and how old were you when you first knew you were an artist, that was your destiny?
So I took.
I don't think there are artists in your family. I know.
Well, there are some. I have.
Your father's a doctor.
My father's sister is a very talented oil painter, Judy Delfiner. And my grandmother did a little bit of painting towards the end of her life, so I think there's some kind of thread going on there.
Okay. And when your father, the doctor, and your mother, the professional volunteer at the University of Pennsylvania, when you said you were going to be an artist, did they faint? What did they say?
Well, I tried to figure out a niche for it. I originally did a lot of synagogue art, so I was offering something other than brass and wood tree of life type thing. So I work in synagogues in Minneapolis, Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., all around the country.
I think you've done some things in New York, too, haven't you?
At the Jewish Theological Seminary, there's a 5-foot by 5-foot burning bush image.
Ooh, and that's mosaic, right?
It is. I use ceramic tile, different semi-precious stones and minerals, and in recent years I've been using hand-blown glass shards, which is a whole nother thing.
Let me see your hands.
Well, I haven't been cutting tile for the last week or so, so they've healed up.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to get back into it next week, so give me a week.
Where did you go? Well, first of all, where did you go to high school?
So I went to Lower Merion High School, and then I went to Northwestern University, which is where I took my first fine art class at age 21. My senior year, we were in a trimester system. So spring quarter, I took a sculpture class, and that lit a spark of interest. And a couple of years later, in 1987, I went and got a Master of Fine Arts at the University of Pennsylvania in what was the Graduate School of Fine Arts.
And how did you launch your career?
So when I was studying for my MFA, I was a sculpture major, and when you study sculpture, there's lots of different techniques you can learn. You can learn to weld or carve wood or model clay. And a close friend of mine who was a painter, who was from Giza in Egypt, where the pyramids are, suggested mosaic. And I did the mosaic, and it really clicked for me. It was very low-tech, and I was able to get into more painterly ideas of spatial composition and color composition and that sort of thing. And I focused myself on doing synagogue art as my original niche, and then got into just all kinds of imagery.
Like the Phillies, like the baseball park?
So yeah, I have a couple of pieces at Citizens Bank Park.
Big pieces, huge pieces.
There's an 8-foot by 6-foot portrait of Citizens Bank Park. It was very serendipitous. I had done a large-scale Phillies-themed piece for a residential client in Wynwood, and then sent the image to the Phillies, and then they came to the client's house, saw the piece I did, and said they wanted me to do one for Citizens Bank Park. So it worked out really well. I had done also a piece for Overbrook High School, a portrait of Wilt Chamberlain, so I had a few things under my belt.
Okay.
Yeah. And more recently, for Lower Merion High School, I did a portrait of Kobe Bryant for the Kobe Bryant Gymnasium.
Fantastic. Was Kobe ever there to see it? I know he's been back a few times.
Yeah, he was. I know he was in a couple years back for the dedication of the Kobe Bryant Gymnasium, and I got a picture with him at that point.
Oh, that's nice. Who's the most famous person you've ever been photographed with? Besides me.
I'd say it's between you and Kobe.
Oh, okay. I don't dribble. I have to be honest about that. volleyball was my sport. I was on the varsity women's volleyball team when I went to Penn.
Wow.
Those were the days when 5'1" Jewish women who played volleyball at camp in the summertime, nobody spiked. They didn't know from spiking.
Yeah.
So we were the champ. We won the championship. They gave us a dinner in the Penn Museum, in the mummy room. They gave us a charm bracelet. It was very nice.
That's
yes.
awesome.
But I don't play volleyball anymore either. I played tennis for many years. Now, where do you do your work? First of all, do you have an alert to all your friends and everybody you know when you break a cup, a china plate, save the pieces and bring them to me?
Absolutely. I've gotten a lot of broken glass, particularly from people. I don't know if you're familiar with the glass artist Dale Chihuly. He has the
Chihuly, oh
so
my
he's like the big guy in the glass world.
Big guy.
And a few times I've been able to get his shards and incorporate them in my pieces. And particularly I did a series of 3 called Nisqually. It was named after an earthquake in the Pacific Northwest that happened in the year 2000. And I made Nisqually 1, 2, and 3, and then gave a percentage of the sale to SURF, Craft Artist Emergency Relief Fund. So I've been able to do...
Craft Artist Emergency Relief Fund.
Yes, SURF.
SURF. Interesting.
So I've been able to partner with different glass artists through the years and incorporate their art in mine, because I don't blow glass and I don't fire tile. I collect material and do my thing.
You're the ultimate, the quintessential recycler.
Absolutely. My art is all about using the grout line or cement line as a drawing line, so it creates the illusion of depth or three-dimensionality or motion or tension or whatever a drawing line could do.
Let's see if we could put one of your other creations up on the screen. I'm not sure. We have a whole bunch of them.
Oh, this is a fun one.
Oh, go ahead.
This was for a residential client in Bryn Mawr who was very fond of the Barnes Foundation, so he commissioned me to do a 6-foot by 4-foot portrait of the great room of the Barnes Foundation.
I love it.
Thank you. A view facing the west wall, and I inserted Dr. Barnes. You can see how the grout lines create the sense of depth into the room, and I take a playful approach to perspective where it's multiple points of view, kind of all happening at once. But trying to recreate like 30 post-impressionist masterworks was a real challenge.
Oh, my
bits
goodness.
of tile. That's a fun one. The Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
And you must have quite a memory where you can just pull these pictures out of your head. You don't always have to have a picture in front of you, right?
A lot of times I do drawings, and I'll use the word mosaic in quotes, using Photoshop, and I'll actually design the tile shapes for the mosaic in my drawing, and they'll blow the drawing up to full scale and then template off of the drawing, so I can very precisely control the shapes of the tiles, which affect the quality of the grout lines and make the image work.
What did your parents say when you announced art was going to be your profession?
Well, they were very encouraging. I was able to get some really interesting projects going early on, and it just kind of evolved over time.
Because usually you hear when actors and screenwriters and artists, when they're asked what their parents' reaction was, they'll say, the parents said, "Oh, how will you ever earn a living?" Did you ever hear those words come out of your parents' mouths?
I think that was, I guess, a concern at one point. It's certainly a concern with my kids. None of my kids have the fine art bug. They're all creative in different ways. So I guess it was a genetic link for me.
What's your children? How old are your kids?
My oldest, Ian, is turning 27. My middle guy, Jake, is turning 22. And my baby, Olivia, just turned 18.
Is the 18-year-old still in high school or college?
She graduated Lower Merion, and she's going to be a Terp at University of Maryland in the fall.
What's a terp?
Terrapin? That's what they call them?
Excuse me.
It's a turtle?
Terrapin. Okay. Yes, all right. I know from Quakers because I went to Penn. So.
Oh.
And Lower Merion is Bulldog, so
Yep.
That's what I know. What advice would you give to young artists that are just starting out? Is it easier? Is it harder?
Well, I think the best thing is to try to create a combination where you're doing commission opportunities and also showing your work through galleries, so you can create work that's your own vision that you can sell through the gallery, and then create work that's oftentimes other people's vision for a commercial application. Like with the Phillies, they wanted this portrait of the ballpark, and I created my drawings based on what they were looking for.
When somebody wants you to create a portrait of a couple in your mosaic art, how do you go about that, and how long does it take?
So people send me pictures, and then I use Photoshop. And if you're familiar with Photoshop, it's all about layers. So in a layer above the picture, I do a drawing where I design the tile shapes, and then I send this mosaic, in quotes, drawing to the client, and then they can say, well, that looks like me, or what does it look like vertical or zoomed in, or make me look younger. My rule of thumb is if you can make the subject 5% more handsome than life, you've got it down.
They'll settle for only 5%.
Well, you don't want everyone to come out looking like George Clooney, you know, you have to...
That's not bad.
Got to strive for likeness, too.
How long did it take you to do the mammoth ballpark?
The portrait of the ballpark?
Yeah.
So that was 8 foot by 6 foot, and it was all high detail. The funny thing about it was
Do you have to sit on the floor when you do it, or?
I do it working upright. I have the panel upright, and it's easier for me because I can really see how it's going to be seen.
It must weigh a ton. What do you have that could hold it in your studio?
I have it attached to like the way a wall would be built with wooden studs, 2x4s. So I screw the frame into the 2x4s, and that's how it hangs.
Did anything ever fall and break?
No, I've been pretty lucky with that. It's just a matter of planning.
Okay, all right. I remember I went to Lower Merion with B.B. Butin, and I remember her telling me one time that she was carrying in a box of Wedgwood for the museum, and they lived in the museum, and she dropped the box.
Ooh.
Yes. Her parents didn't kill her, but they never asked her to carry things in again after that. So that I always think about that. Oh my God, all that they should have saved the broken pieces of Wedgwood. You would have had a good time with that, right?
Absolutely.
Did you ever get anything really interesting that was broken that you were able to use?
Well, one of the more interesting things that I used, I did 2 mosaics for Lower Merion High School. One is a portrait of Kobe that's 4 foot by 3 foot, and the other is a 10 foot by 6 foot Lower Merion theme piece that's in the entrance when you come in from Montgomery Avenue, the
I've
main
seen
entrance.
that many times.
And it's a whole montage of images that tell the school's 100+ year history. But in the center is a rendering of the previous high school, and I had them knock loose brick from the facade of that high school, cut that brick down, and used it to make the rendering so people could always touch the old school in perpetuity. So it's a neat way of using material.
What a lovely thought. What a lovely thought. What are you working on right now?
So my next public projects are going to be for the JFCS, the Jewish Family and Children's Services. They have a new structure going up in Marion.
I think we can put a picture of that.
It's a 7
on the
foot
screen.
by 5 foot hamsa.
Hamsa means a hand.
Yeah, it's a hand. It's like a good luck symbol.
There we go.
So
look at those gorgeous colors.
So that's my drawing, and it's going to be made using hand-blown glass and different semi-precious stones and minerals, and that'll be wall-mounted.
Where do you get the semi-precious stones?
Actually, believe it or not, eBay is a great resource. They have a whole rock, fossil, mineral section within eBay, so you can put in amethyst or tiger eye or whatever you're looking for, and I get rough stone, polished stone, all kinds of materials through that way.
What happens when you have an opening for the dedication of one of your pieces?
Usually I give a little explanation about my process and what I was trying to do with the imagery, and kind of answer a few questions. I had done a piece for Bryn Mawr Hospital that's in the Warden lobby. It was actually just put in storage because they're putting up a major new tower.
Oh yes, they're building like crazy there, yes.
But it's 8 foot by 6, and it's a whole, again, montage of images. And one of the really fun sequences, it was actually the last image that they finalized. And it's the lower corner, and it's like 1960 era student nurse checking out her nurse's cap in the mirror. So it has flesh tones, mirror, and then reflected flesh tones in the mosaic. It's kind of a neat thing because the mirror draws you in because your reflection, and it's fun to do.
Very interesting.
I think I'm also safe in saying that I'm the world's first person to do a mosaic rendering of knee replacement surgery. That was one of the panels as well. So it was was a lot of history, and also sending my drawings around to people in the hospital community as to what they thought worked best, because they're more steeped in their own history than me.
Do they make you come before the Board of Trustees to make a presentation?
No, just passed around my drawings, and then
Oh.
people made comments and suggestions along the way.
Do you belong to some professional organizations?
For fine art, do you mean?
Yeah.
I
Is there such a
I'm in-
thing as a mosaic mural professional organization?
Well,
I
the
don't
closest thing I could say to that would be I served on the Penn Design Alumni Board Association, so that involved fine art and architecture and all that sort of thing.
know. They don't have, like the United Mosaic
There
Mural
actually
Artists
is,
of America.
there's an organization called SAMA, Society of American Mosaic Artists,
Oh, there is.
but I'm not a member. I kind of took the Groucho Marx approach to that about, what did he say about he would never join an organization that would have him for a member?
What do you do for vacation?
Not cut tile.
But do you collect?
I collect a lot of stones and materials. I'm like a pack rat. I have all kinds of glass and semi-precious stones and minerals and tile, and eventually it gets plugged in somewhere.
You have a studio
I do.
behind your residence?
Yeah, in Bala Cynwyd, I have a detached two-car garage that I set up as a studio, and it's just big enough to get it done. I've done life-size deer sculpture there, the 10-foot by 6-foot Lower Merion piece I did there in one piece. Just a matter of using what space I have efficiently.
Are you fantasizing doing something like 40 feet by 40 feet someday?
I don't think I'd want to do one whole panel that big, but perhaps a whole series of smaller panels that kind of montage together.
A triptych.
Yeah, but even more than three, just, a whole bunch of images.
What museums do you like to go to in your spare time?
Well, the Barnes Foundation is certainly a lot of fun, having spent a lot of time studying the artwork there
Yes.
and my renderings. Of course, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And
They've got a fabulous modern show right now. It's the Keith and Kathy Sachs collection.
Sure.
They've donated or pledged that they'll donate 100 pieces of modern art from the mid 20th century to current day. But the most fascinating thing is they've got all this documentation with photos and letters when the artist came to their home, had lunch, had dinner. They became close friends with the artist. Just really incredible collection.
That's terrific. It's like being part of history.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's opened up a whole other niche for the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is known for. I mean, I prefer my art period is Renoir, Gauguin, is the Impressionists,
yeah.
and I used to love to go to the Barnes when it was in Lower Merion. Now I love to go to the Barnes where it is on the Parkway.
Sure.
And it looks exactly, when you get inside, the galleries look exactly the way they did, with the same, all the hinges and crazy things that he collected, that he interspersed with the gorgeous artwork and the furniture. But they've got some galleries where they can have visiting exhibits.
Sure.
I was there recently for really crazy things. Nari Ward, you would enjoy seeing his exhibit because it's found art. It's things he finds on the street that people throw away, and he creates art out of it. I mean, just really incredible. And there's one that's floor to ceiling where he collected the oven pans underneath the burners when people threw stoves out. And they're like floor to ceiling. And then he got 100 baseball bats. He couldn't get the bodega owners to give them their baseball bats. He was going to trade their wooden bats for, he would give them an aluminum bat, but they used them for protection instead of a gun. So, Louisville Slugger, he wrote to that company, and if there's an imperfection in one of their wooden bats that's destined for a baseball team, they can't use it.
Sure.
They donated He needed it for the Whitney Biennial. They donated 100 bats to him. So, what he did with them was to burn them, not to a crisp, but he burnt them, and they're lined up at the bottom of this gigantic installation. I mean, I was taught to look at modern art by an artist, my late artist friend Ferris Woolston, who lived in the English Village. She was my next door neighbor. And she took me to an exhibit where all the paintings were black. It was Jimmy Ernst. His father was, internationally known, Max Ernst. Mm-hmm. And all the paintings were black. And I thought, this is dumb, they're all black. She said, Bonnie, look closely. And when you look closely, you could see designs either flat black or shiny black. And every painting was different, but they were all black. I said, oh, my introduction to modern art. That's how it began. I still like Renoir. That's still my favorite. Except for when I see your interpretation of the barns.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. It's a challenge because I'm working with little bits of tile and stone and trying to make it look like these iconic paintings. So you have to include as much detail as you can to make it recognizable, and yet as much as you're able because of the medium.
How do you ship something that weighs so much?
Crate it. Wooden crate.
Big wooden crate.
Yeah, I have really talented craters that know how to handle, and they've also helped install my art.
Okay. So the next one that you're working on, that Hamsa, where's that destined for? In
Marion. It's the JFCS building. It's the Brodsky Center for Enrichment that they're putting up.
It's going to be on Montgomery Avenue?
It's in Montgomery Avenue in Marion, and I believe it's opening around November, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
And also...
How big is that going to be, your mural?
My artwork's going to be 7 foot by 5 foot, wall mounted.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Pretty big. Where do you get the stones, the semi-precious stones?
So I get the stones...
or you ask your mother to empty some of her jewelry drawers?
through suppliers on eBay is the best resource for the stones.
Did you ever find stones?
Occasionally, but I kind of leave it to the professionals that do the mining of the stones, and I just select them based on how pretty they are and try to remember the name of the given stone so I can get more of it.
Did you enjoy painting the donkeys?
I did. I hadn't painted in 20 years, so it was a bit of a learning curve to get back up and running. The other trick was they gave us a week to execute 2 life-size donkeys.
1 week is all they gave you?
Yeah, so mosaic was out of the question, and paint was a challenge. It was like donkey boot camp for a week. I worked on them in my basement for about a week, 14-hour days straight, and knocked them out and dropped them off to the mural arts
14 hours. Did your wife, Monica, did she bring you sustenance?
She even got involved with some painting. She picked up a brush and was helping to block out areas of color. And one thing I've done a lot with my mosaic is putting imagery, wrapping imagery around life-size animal forms. I've done a lot of life-size deer sculpture where I put images of people and landscapes wrapping around the animal forms. So I had that going for me, and I was able to pretty efficiently set up my images around the donkey form, and then it was a matter of just getting back into how to mix colors and apply the paint to the donkey and that sort of thing.
So what's the date of the auction for the donkeys?
I believe it's September 9th. They have a website called ArtJawn, J-A-W-N, where it has information about the auction and the location of the 57 or 58 donkeys that are around Philadelphia.
Where are your 2 if people want to
So I was really fortunate. They gave me good locations. My Delaware donkey is on Market Street between 11th and 12th, right under the sign for the PA Convention Center. And my Connecticut donkey is in Independence Mall South. If you're on 6th Street with Chestnut Street behind you and you're heading towards Market, it's on your left halfway down the block, the Independence Beer Garden. And it's right to the entrance of that. So I'm like half a block from the Liberty Bell. That's pretty cool.
You're very visible.
Yeah.
Well, our guest today has been Jonathan Mandell, artist extraordinaire, and we'll see everybody next week.